The Galactic Senate was having what they called a productive day, which in political terms meant nobody had tried to declare war on anybody else for at least 3 standard hours. Senator Vex Malik of the Tenthari Confederation was reviewing the morning reports when something caught his attention that made his 4 eyes widen considerably. "Wait," he muttered, his voice carrying that distinct nasal quality that made other species want to stuff cotton in their auditory receptors. "This can't be right." The holographic display in front of him showed the official galactic census update, and there, listed under recently extinct species, was a rather alarming entry. Homo sapiens, Sol system, 3rd planet. Status, total extinction. Cause, self-inflicted warfare and environmental collapse. Last confirmed sighting, 2.3 standard years ago. Vex Malik's tentacles twitched nervously. This was actually quite serious. The humans had been causing headaches for the Galactic Senate for decades now. Not because they were particularly powerful, mind you, but because they had this absolutely maddening habit of refusing to follow any sensible galactic protocols. "Senator Vex Malik," the shrill voice of his assistant, Pip Cora, echoed across his office. "The morning briefing is ready, and might I add, you look particularly stressed today. More so than usual, if that's even possible." Vex Malik shot her a look that could have melted titanium. "Pip Cora, we have a situation. The humans are officially extinct." "Oh, wonderful news!" Pip Cora clapped her 6 hands together enthusiastically. "No more dealing with their ridiculous requests for individual rights and planetary sovereignty. Honestly, the audacity of that species was becoming quite tiresome." "You're missing the point," Vex Malik said, waving the census report in the air. "If the humans are extinct, who exactly has been sending us complaint letters every single day for the past 2 years? Pip Cora's expression shifted from delight to confusion, which on her species looked remarkably like someone trying to solve advanced mathematics while having an allergic reaction. "That's actually a very good question, Senator." The morning session of the Galactic Senate was proceeding with its usual level of organized chaos. Representatives from over 300 species were present, each trying to out-talk the others in what they generously called diplomatic discourse. The topic of the day was trade regulation disputes, which was about as exciting as watching paint dry in a vacuum. Senator Xyle Prime of the Corthan Empire stood at the central podium, his voice booming across the amphitheater. "The proposed tariffs on crystalline exports are absolutely preposterous. My people have been mining those crystals for over 5 millennia, and we will not stand for this economic persecution." Several dozen representatives immediately began shouting objections, creating a cacophony that sounded like a space whale having an argument with a fusion reactor. It was at this precise moment of maximum chaos that something extraordinary happened. The massive doors to the Senate chamber, each weighing approximately 14 tons and requiring a small army of mechanical assistants to operate, suddenly opened with a sound that echoed through the entire building. And through those doors walked a human. Not a hologram. Not a recording. Not some sort of elaborate practical joke involving advanced puppetry. An actual, living, breathing human being. The Senate chamber fell silent so quickly that the sudden absence of noise was actually painful to several species with sensitive hearing. 300 pairs, triplets, and in one case, septuplets of eyes turned to stare at the impossible sight. The human was female, appeared to be in her mid-30s by human standards, and had the kind of confident stride that suggested she either knew exactly what she was doing or was completely insane. Possibly both. She was wearing what appeared to be a standard Earth business suit, which looked remarkably well preserved for someone from an extinct civilization. Senator Vex Malik felt his heart's, plural, skip several beats. This was definitely not supposed to be happening. The human walked straight down the central aisle of the Senate chamber, her footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. She didn't seem remotely intimidated by the fact that she was surrounded by hundreds of alien beings, many of whom had enough teeth and claws to turn her into a very small snack. When she reached the central speaking platform, she looked around the chamber with what could only be described as mild amusement. "Well," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustically perfect design. "This is awkward." Senator Zal Prime, still standing at the podium, was opening and closing his mouth like a fish trying to breathe air. His species was known for their eloquence and diplomatic skills, but apparently, encountering extinct species hadn't been covered in his training. You're, he stammered. "Human?" "Yes, guilty as charged," the woman replied with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly terrifying. "My name is Victoria Sterling, and I represent the Terran Colonial Administration. Though I have to say, I'm a bit concerned about the quality of your intelligence reports." She gestured casually toward the massive display screen that still showed the galactic census with its declaration of human extinction. "According to your records, my species has been extinct for over 2 years now. Which raises some interesting questions, don't you think?" The Senate chamber remained frozen in stunned silence. Several representatives were frantically checking their personal data devices, probably hoping to find some explanation for what they were witnessing. Victoria Sterling continued, seemingly unbothered by the fact that she had just caused what was potentially the biggest diplomatic incident in galactic history. "I mean, I understand mistakes happen. Bureaucracy is complicated, record-keeping is hard, and I'm sure you all have very busy schedules, but declaring an entire species extinct while they're still very much alive and actively trying to communicate with you? That's what we humans call a pretty significant oversight." Senator Cor Theta of the Silicon Collective finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a mechanical wheeze. "This is impossible. Our long-range sensors confirmed the complete devastation of your homeworld. The atmospheric readings showed toxic levels incompatible with organic life. The electromagnetic signatures indicated total technological collapse." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "Ah, yes, about that. You see, there's something you might not know about humans. We're really, really good at surviving things that should probably kill us. It's kind of our specialty." She walked over to one of the auxiliary display screens and, with a casual gesture that made several security guards reach for their weapons, activated it using what appeared to be a standard galactic interface device. Images began appearing on the screen. Cities. Not the ruins that the galactic surveys had reported, but functioning, thriving metropolitan areas. Humans walking around, going about their daily lives, looking very much not extinct. After the environmental crisis you detected, we did what humans do best. We adapted. Underground cities, atmospheric processors, orbital habitats, generation ships sent to other systems. We didn't die, gentlemen and ladies, and whatever species uses different pronouns. We evolved. Senator Vex Malik felt like his brain was trying to process information that simply didn't fit into any known category. But the surveys, the radiation levels, the complete communication silence. "Oh, the communication silence," Victoria said with a laugh that was definitely more on the scary side of amused. "That was intentional. You see, we kept sending diplomatic messages, trade proposals, requests for membership in the galactic community. And you kept, well, You kept ignoring us. Every single message, every attempt at contact, every formal application for recognition. Ignored. The silence in the chamber was now so complete that the sound of Victoria's breathing was audible. So we thought, fine, if they want to pretend we don't exist, let's see how that works out for them. She gestured around the chamber with a smile that would have made a predator nervous. Turns out, pretending an entire species doesn't exist has some interesting consequences. For instance, all those trade routes that pass through the Sol system, the ones you've been using without permission for the past 5 years? According to galactic law, since we're extinct, those routes should be classified as disputed territory. Several representatives began making choking sounds, which was concerning considering some of them breathed methane. And all those mining operations in the asteroid belt around our dead system? Technically, that's grave robbing. Very serious crime in most galactic legal codes. Senator Vex Malik was starting to understand why his species had developed stress-induced molting. Miss Sterling, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Oh, absolutely, Victoria replied cheerfully. I'm completely open to reasonable discussion. That's why I'm here instead of, say, filing formal complaints with the Galactic Court of Justice for systematic discrimination, illegal resource extraction, and… She paused dramatically. Wrongful declaration of death. The phrase, wrongful declaration of death, hit the Senate chamber like a neutron bomb. In galactic law, wrongfully declaring a sentient species extinct was not just a crime, it was one of the most serious crimes possible. It carried penalties that could result in the dissolution of entire governments. Now, Victoria continued, her voice taking on a tone that was somehow both pleasant and absolutely terrifying. I'm sure this is all just a big misunderstanding. After all, surely the wise and benevolent Galactic Senate wouldn't systematically ignore an entire species just because they found our requests for basic recognition inconvenient. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with dozens of representatives who suddenly found their shoes, talons, or whatever they used for feet to be absolutely fascinating. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to officially recognize the continued existence of humanity. You're going to grant us full membership in the galactic community, with all associated rights and privileges, and you're going to compensate us for 2.5 years of unauthorized use of our territory. Senator Cortheta's mechanical voice crackled with static. And if we refuse? Victoria's smile widened, and somehow that made it infinitely more frightening. Well, that's where things get interesting. You see, while you all thought we were dead, we weren't just sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves. We were expanding, building, growing, making friends. The display screen behind her lit up with new images. Ships. Lots of ships. Really, really big ships with what appeared to be enough firepower to turn small moons into cosmic dust. Turns out, there are quite a few species in this galaxy who have also been having some difficulties with certain galactic policies. Species who have been marginalized, overlooked, or had their resources appropriated without proper compensation. We've been talking. The Senate chamber had gone from stunned silence to the kind of terrified silence usually reserved for natural disasters and tax audits. The Outer Rim Coalition sends their regards, by the way. Lovely people, the Zephyrians. Very understanding about the whole being ignored by Galactic authorities situation. They're actually waiting just outside your system with about 300 of their closest friends, in case you need time to think about your answer. Senator Vex Malik was now molting so rapidly that the floor around his seat was beginning to look like it had snowed. "Miss Sterling, surely there's no need for threats." "Oh, this isn't a threat, Senator. This is just information. The threat comes later, if necessary." She walked back to the center of the speaking platform and looked around the chamber one more time. "I want to be absolutely clear about something. Humanity doesn't want war. We don't want to conquer anybody or destroy anything. We just want the same thing every species wants: recognition, respect, and the right to exist without having to prove that existence to bureaucrats who can't be bothered to answer their mail." The chamber remained silent, but now it was the kind of silence that comes when several hundred very intelligent beings are all trying to figure out how they managed to make such a spectacularly bad decision. "However," Victoria continued, and that single word seemed to drop the temperature in the chamber by several degrees, "if you continue to pretend that humanity doesn't exist, if you continue to exploit our resources and ignore our sovereignty, then you're going to discover just how creative an extinct species can be when it comes to protecting itself." She turned and began walking back toward the chamber doors. "I'll give you 24 standard hours to make your decision. After that, things are going to get very interesting. Very quickly." As she reached the doors, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and one more thing. That fleet waiting outside your system? That's just the advanced scout. We have friends now. Lots of friends. And they're all very curious to see how the Galactic Senate handles this situation." The doors closed behind her with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire building. For a full minute, nobody in the Senate chamber moved or spoke. Finally, Senator Zayal Prime cleared his throat. "Well," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "I motion to adjourn for emergency consultation." The vote was unanimous. 23 hours and 57 minutes later, the Galactic Senate was in what could only be described as complete pandemonium. Emergency sessions had been called, subcommittees had formed subcommittees, and Senator Vex Malik had molted so extensively that the janitorial staff had filed a formal complaint. "This is a disaster of unprecedented proportions." Senator Flix Gamora, of the Helix Worlds, was gesticulating wildly with all 8 of her appendages. "Do you realize what the legal ramifications are if the Terrans file that wrongful death claim?" "Legal ramifications?" Senator Cor Theta's mechanical voice buzzed with static from stress overload. "What about the military ramifications? Did anyone actually count how many ships were in those images?" Senator Brix Tolan of the Crystal Spheres, who had been frantically calculating on his quantum abacus for the past 6 hours, looked up with an expression of absolute terror. "According to my analysis of the ship configurations shown in the humans' presentation, the Outer Rim Coalition has assembled a force capable of, well, let's just say, comprehensive urban renewal of our core worlds." The emergency session chamber, normally used for minor disputes about trade routes and fishing rights, now felt woefully inadequate for discussing potential galactic war. Representatives were huddled in groups, whispering in languages that sounded increasingly panicked, regardless of species. "Gentlemen, ladies, and assorted sentient beings," announced High Chancellor Kex Varian, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 centuries mediating galactic disputes and really didn't want to deal with this particular problem. "We need to address the reality of our situation." The chamber fell silent, though it was the kind of silence that vibrated with barely contained hysteria. "First, our intelligence division has confirmed that the human claims are accurate. Humanity is not extinct. Our sensors detected environmental catastrophe, but failed to account for their remarkable adaptability. Several representatives began making the galactic equivalent of nervous whimpering. Second, our legal department has informed me that a wrongful extinction declaration carries penalties including, but not limited to, complete governmental restructure, massive reparations, and potential dissolution of our authority over contested territories. The whimpering intensified. Third, and perhaps most concerning, our military advisors have analyzed the coalition fleet composition. Their assessment is— She paused, looking for diplomatic phrasing. Unfavorable to our continued existence as a functioning governmental body. Senator Vex Malik raised a trembling tentacle. High Chancellor, surely we can negotiate some sort of compromise. Perhaps partial recognition with limited territorial concessions? Senator, did you miss the part where they have 300 warships parked outside our system? Before Vex Malik could respond, the chamber's communication system activated with an incoming message. The central holographic display lit up, showing Victoria Sterling's face. She appeared to be sitting in what looked like the command center of a very impressive spacecraft. "Good morning, esteemed members of the Galactic Senate," she said with a smile that was somehow both pleasant and predatory. "I hope you've had a restful night thinking about our conversation." High Chancellor Kex Varian stepped forward. "Miss Sterling, we appreciate your patience, and we're prepared to discuss terms." "Oh, how wonderful!" Victoria interrupted cheerfully. "I was hoping you'd say that, because I have some friends here who are very excited to meet you." The camera view expanded, revealing that Victoria was not alone. Standing behind her were representatives from at least a dozen different species, none of whom looked particularly friendly toward the Galactic Senate. "Allow me to introduce Admiral Kes Torva of the Zephyrian Navy." Victoria gestured to a being that looked like it could bench press a small asteroid. "Commander Yith Plexa of the Rim Guard." She indicated a creature with entirely too many eyes and what appeared to be natural armor plating. "And General Rex Quintana of the Free Miners Consortium." Each introduction was accompanied by what could generously be called intimidating stares and what more accurately could be called the kind of looks that made you want to update your will. "Now then," Victoria continued, "my associates and I have been discussing your situation, and we've come to some interesting conclusions." The Senate chamber had achieved a level of silence that was actually creating a mild vacuum effect. "It seems that humanity isn't the only species you've been overlooking. The Zephyrians have been trying to get recognition for their territorial claims for 15 years. The Plexa have been requesting trade agreements for a decade. The Miners' Consortium has been asking for basic workers' rights protections since before some of your current senators were even hatched." Senator Brix Tolan made a sound like a deflating balloon. This was getting worse by the minute. "So here's what we propose," Victoria said, her tone becoming distinctly more businesslike. "Full recognition and membership for all coalition species, with retroactive territorial and resource rights. Compensation for years of ignored communications and unauthorized exploitation. And," her smile turned absolutely wicked, "a formal apology." "A formal apology?" High Chancellor Kex Varian repeated weakly. "Oh yes, a public, official acknowledgement that the Galactic Senate made a teensy-tiny mistake when it declared an entire living civilization extinct, and then ignored dozens of other species for decades." Admiral Kes Torva leaned into the frame, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like gravel being processed in a cement mixer. "The alternative is that we demonstrate why ignoring armed species is generally considered poor policy." The holographic display shifted, to show exterior views from the coalition fleet. The Senate chamber's main screen filled with images of ships that made their own defense forces look like toys. Weapons arrays that could probably crack planets. Shield systems that glowed with enough energy to power small suns. "Now, I want to be completely fair about this," Victoria said, drawing attention back to herself. "We're not unreasonable beings. We understand that mistakes happen. Bureaucracies are complicated. Sometimes important messages get lost in the shuffle." Her expression hardened slightly. "But when those mistakes involve declaring entire civilizations dead and then stealing their resources, well, that's when mistakes become problems, and problems require solutions." Commander Ythplexa moved into view, their multiple eyes focusing on the camera with unnerving intensity. "The Coalition has agreed to give the Senate one final opportunity to rectify these oversights. We suggest you take it." The transmission ended, leaving the Senate chamber in absolute silence. Senator Vex Malik was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "High Chancellor, I believe we should vote on the human proposal." "Seconded," came a chorus of voices from across the chamber. "All in favor of immediate recognition of the Terran Colonial Administration and associated coalition members?" High Chancellor Kex Varian asked. The vote was so unanimous, it was probably visible from orbit. 6 hours later, Victoria Sterling stood once again in the Galactic Senate chamber, but the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of shock and terror, there was grudging respect mixed with healthy wariness. High Chancellor Kex Varian read from an official document that had been drafted, revised, and approved in record time. "The Galactic Senate hereby officially recognizes the continued existence and sovereignty of humanity, formally apologizes for the administrative error regarding their extinction status, and welcomes the Terran Colonial Administration as full members of the galactic community." Victoria nodded approvingly. "And the territorial compensation? All unauthorized mining and shipping operations in the Sol system will cease immediately, with full monetary compensation to be calculated by independent arbitrators. The other coalition members? Full recognition and membership for all coalition species, with immediate processing of all pending territorial and trade requests." Victoria smiled, and for the first time since this whole affair began, it was genuinely warm rather than terrifying. "Excellent. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship." Senator Vex Malik, who had finally stopped molting, raised a tentacle. "Miss Sterling, may I ask how you managed to organize such an extensive coalition so quickly?" Victoria's expression became thoughtful. "You know, Senator, that's actually a very good question. The answer is pretty simple, though. When you ignore people long enough, they start talking to each other. And when they start talking to each other, they realize they have a lot in common." She gestured toward the viewing ports, where the coalition fleet was still visible against the star field. "Turns out, there are a lot of species out there who got tired of being treated like they didn't matter. Humans just happen to be the ones with enough spite to do something about it." Admiral Kes Torva, who had been invited to observe the proceedings, let out what might have been a laugh. "In our culture, we have a saying, 'Never anger those you have wronged, for they remember everything and forgive nothing.'" "That's a lovely saying," Victoria replied. "We have a similar one. Don't poke the bear unless you're prepared for the consequences." "What's a bear?" asked Senator Brix Tolan. Victoria's grin was absolutely predatory. "You really, really don't want to find out." High Chancellor Kex Varian cleared her throat diplomatically. "Miss Sterling, now that we've resolved this situation, What are humanity's intentions regarding galactic politics? Simple, Victoria replied. We want to participate. We want to contribute. We want to trade, explore, learn, and grow alongside other species. But we also want to make sure that what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with dozens of representatives. The galaxy is a big place with room for everyone, but it only works if everyone gets a voice. The coalition exists because too many species have been denied that voice for too long. We intend to make sure that changes. Commander Youthplexa stepped forward. The coalition will be establishing permanent diplomatic missions on all core worlds. We believe in active participation in galactic governance. The translation was clear. We're going to be watching you very, very carefully. As the formal ceremony concluded and the various representatives began filing out, Victoria found herself approached by Senator Vex Malik. Miss Sterling, he said hesitantly, I hope you understand that the Senate's actions weren't malicious. We have so many requests, so many communications. Victoria studied him for a moment, then nodded. Senator, I do understand that. Running a galactic government is incredibly complicated. But here's the thing about humans that you should probably remember for future reference. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conversational level. We're really, really good at holding grudges, and we're even better at making sure those grudges serve a purpose. This whole situation could have been avoided with a single response to a single message. Instead, you got a military alliance that's going to reshape galactic politics for the next century. Vex Malik's tentacles drooped. I suppose there's a lesson in that. Oh, absolutely, Victoria replied cheerfully. The lesson is, always answer your mail. As she walked toward the chamber exit, she paused and looked back one more time. Oh, and Senator? Next time you think a species might be extinct, maybe send someone to double-check before you start dividing up their stuff. Just a suggestion. The doors closed behind her, leaving the Galactic Senate to contemplate a new reality where ignoring problems didn't make them go away, and where the supposedly extinct had a disturbing tendency to show up with friends, lawyers, and really, really big guns. In the months that followed, the coalition became a major political force, advocating for smaller species and ensuring that no legitimate request for recognition went unanswered. Humanity, meanwhile, established itself as both a valuable trading partner and a species you definitely didn't want to underestimate. And somewhere in the depths of the Galactic Senate's administrative offices, a new policy was quietly implemented. All extinction declarations now required verification by no fewer than 3 independent survey teams, because, as it turned out, declaring someone dead while they were still very much alive was not just embarrassing, it was downright dangerous, especially when that someone turned out to be human.